He was a Nazi death camp survivor who emigrated to Canada, became a doctor, and eventually led the fight for women to have legal abortions. Dr. Henry Morgentaler was revered by some as a hero, denounced by others as a murderer. Yet there is no doubt that he changed the course of history in this country.
Defiance. It is what once saved Dr. Henry Morgentaler. It is certainly what pained him, what earned him adoration and gratitude in Canada, as well as decades of threats and contempt. Bravery in abundance and not a moment's regret. His best day ever, he was fond of saying, was January 28, 1988. The day Canada's Supreme Court tossed out Canada's laws against abortion.
Bravo for the Supreme Court of Canada. Bravo for the women of Canada.
An end to the laws that determined abortions could only be done in hospitals, only when approved by committees. A milestone moment for Canadian women, delivered by a man from Poland. He survived the Nazi death camps of Auschwitz and Dachau, had every reason to just try to build a quiet, comfortable, peaceful life. But he chose to fight, he said, to protect women.
We believe that any woman should have the right to ask for a termination of pregnancy within the first 3 months of pregnancy.
In 1969, he walked away from a lucrative private practice as a family doctor and began performing illegal abortions in Montreal, ultimately thousands of them. In an interview just a few years ago, he explained that he knew exactly what he was taking on in those early years.
I knew that if I started doing abortions on a bigger scale, that eventually I'd have to face the criminal code and prosecution.
Indeed he did, spending 10 months in jail. Ultimately, he opened clinics across the country wherever he felt women were at risk. And like clockwork, there were raids, protests, charges, and worse, violence. Even after the Supreme Court victory, the street got ugly. His Toronto clinic torched, bombed, a sniper plotted to kill him, and the shouting did not stop. Those who once stood on the clinic steps guarding the man and the cause have nothing but gratitude for Morgentaler today.
He was determined not to be stopped, and I think the Holocaust experience was very key to that, because he saw what could happen if you don't stand up for what you believe in.
It's a measure of Canada now that Morgentaler's clinics today are still deeply conscious of security, often adorned with bulletproof windows. Decades after those abortion laws were struck down in this country, there are still some who want to reopen the debate. Anti-abortion postcards passed out in the Prime Minister's riding recently. And Morgentaler foes, far from remembering him as a heroic figure now. Even an honorary degree, even the Order of Canada, every award greeted with anger by some. But Dr. Henry Morgentaler was made of steely stuff.
If I have to die tomorrow by an assassin's bullet, well, at least I've achieved something in my life.
He always wanted, he said, to leave a mark, to feel he accomplished something, that he mattered. No friend or foe could deny that he did just that.
So you helped him fight to open a clinic here in Toronto?
Yes, me and many others, of course, yes.
What happened to women who wanted abortions before that?
Well, it was very difficult. If you were a middle-class woman, you had access to abortion. You could go to Buffalo, or you could go to Montreal, or you had a private gynecologist. But for teenagers, or women from the North, or women from First Nations reserves, or women new to the country, they didn't have the access. So it was a very privileged access, and we supposedly had universal health care.
It just seemed to bring something out in him which was remarkable.
For the last 20 years, I fought for the right of women to have access to safe medical abortion so that their lives, their health, their fertility, and their dignity be protected.
By the end of his career, Morgentaler had successfully opened 6 clinics in Canada, offering legal and safe abortions to women. But the fight for abortion rights remains a hotbed issue today. Anti-abortion activists are determined to bring an end to abortion in Canada. It's an issue that the Conservative government under Prime Minister Harper has refused so far to reopen.
Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 1, you are guaranteed the rights and freedoms set out in the Charter unless they can be reasonably limited. Section 7, life, liberty, and security of the person. Criminal Code of Canada, Section 251, subsection 1, you're guilty of an indictable offence if you attempt to procure a miscarriage of a female person and can be put in prison for life. Subsection 2, if you obtain an unlawful abortion, you're guilty of an indictable offence and can be put in prison for 2 years. 51, subsection 4, exceptions to the indictable offences. A, if a member of the Therapeutic Abortion Committee in a certified hospital. B, a female obtaining the abortion from a certified hospital. C, if you have the certificate from a certified abortion committee. D, if you have a copy of the certificate to give the doctor performing the abortion. Subsection 6 is just definitions.
3 duly qualified medical practitioners set up a clinic to perform abortions.
Women would go to the clinics who had not obtained a certificate from a therapeutic abortion committee as set out by Section 251(4) of the Criminal Code.
The doctors performing the abortions questioned the wisdom of the abortion laws in Canada, and they thought that they were unconstitutional because they were putting the women under extreme stress. The doctors argued that women should have the ultimate right to choose whether or not an abortion is appropriate in their individual circumstances, rather than allowing doctors to make health decisions for them. For example, some doctors would say no to an abortion if they knew the woman was married, and some would only grant them if they knew that the woman's life was at risk while carrying the baby.
The appellants were charged with conspiring to procure an abortion on women who had not obtained a certificate from a therapeutic abortion committee. This was contrary to Section 251(4) of the Criminal Code.
Counsel for the appellants argued that Section 251 of the Criminal Code was ultra vires Parliament of Canada. Ultra vires means, in this situation, that it was out of federal jurisdiction because health and health care and hospitals were a provincial delegation.
It also was noted that Section 7 of the Charter was infringed. That is the right to life, liberty, and security of the person.
Issue 1. Does Section 251 of the Criminal Code of Canada infringe or deny the rights and freedoms guaranteed by Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms? To answer this question, the courts split Section 7 up into 2 clauses: security of the person and principles of fundamental justice. The harsh limitations put on the obtainment of an abortion breached security of the person because it was interfering with the bodily integrity of pregnant women, and also psychological stress was imposed.
The principles of fundamental justice were breached as well because
the women were not able to obtain an abortion in a timely manner, resulting in some delivering stillbirths and some being canceled completely.
Statistics from the Bagley Report, 1978, demonstrated that it was more difficult to obtain a certificate from a therapeutic abortion committee than Parliament initially anticipated. This is because less than 30% are actually qualified to perform an abortion. Issue number 2. As Section 251 of the Criminal Code of Canada infringes or denies the rights and freedoms guaranteed by Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, is Section 251 justified by Section 1 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and therefore not inconsistent with the Constitution Act of 1982?
To answer this question, the courts performed the Oakes test, where they found that Section 251(4) did not achieve a rational, fair, and non-arbitrary objective.
Although the interest to protect a pregnant woman was a valid government objective, the means used to advance this legislation did not satisfy the elements in the Oakes test.
It was found that more harm was being done to the women than the good that was intended.
This is due to the long wait times that women were found to have waited in order to obtain an abortion.
Issues 3 to 7 are not relevant for this case brief.
The appeal was allowed. Section 251 was not saved under Section 1 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was breached.
Following the 1988 decision, Dr. Morgentaler opened up a clinic in Nova Scotia and performed 14 abortions after finding out that the province had enacted legislation to criminalize abortions outside of designated hospitals. This legislation was found to be very similar to Section 251 of the Criminal Code, which was struck down in 1988. This raised questions as to whether the government's true intentions were to limit hospitals and their medicine, or to limit socially undesirable behavior about the conduct of getting an abortion.
As stated in the video, Morgentaler opened multiple abortion clinics after his prior ones were shut down.
This was because he stood up for the rights of women and his only bias was in their favor, ensuring that they were able to get abortions in a timely manner.